When Jungkook can't move after a mysterious collapse, Jimin's emotional breakdown in the hospital shocks everyone and leaves the staff in tears. "Why can't I feel my legs?" Jungkook's voice cracked like shattered porcelain against the sterile hush of the hospital room. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, indifferent to the chaos unraveling beneath them. His fingers trembled as they clawed at the edge of the blanket, his wide eyes locked onto Jimin's pale face. A cold sweat traced the curve of his temple. His breath hitched, sharp and panicked, and in the seconds that followed, the silence became unbearable. Jimin froze. His hand, just inches from Jungkook's, recoiled as if burned. For a moment, time fractured. Doctors had swarmed the ICU earlier that evening after Jungkook collapsed on stage during rehearsals. No warning, no signs. He had simply dropped, as though the strings of life tethering him had been violently cut. His body convulsed once before going unnaturally still. No pulse, no explanation. But now, he was breathing, awake, and paralyzed. "Don't move, Jungkook, just don't panic," Jimin whispered, voice trembling. Yet he didn't move either. He stared at his best friend, the man who had once danced with the world on fire and saw only fear, not of death, but of life without motion. The medical staff watched from beyond the glass pane, uncertain whether to intervene or give space. No one could explain what had happened. His scans were clean, no trauma, no neural damage. And yet he could not move. Jimin had always been the strongest among them, the quiet anchor in their turbulent sea of fame and exhaustion. But tonight, something inside him cracked. "I should have seen it," Jimin muttered, stepping back. "All those nights you came home with your knees shaking, your voice gone, pretending you were fine God, Jungkook." Jungkook's lip trembled, and he shook his head slowly. "It's not your fault. I didn't tell you. I didn't tell anyone." "You didn't have to," Jimin snapped. "You didn't have to say a word, Jungkook. You were screaming without sound, and I ignored it." The monitors beeped in time with Jungkook's shallow breaths. The air was thick with antiseptic and guilt. A nurse quietly adjusted the IV line and slipped out, her eyes glassy. She wasn't the only one. No one had ever seen Jimin cry like this. Not the staff, not even the members. But as he sank to his knees beside the bed, hands trembling against the cold rail, the dam finally broke. "I can't do this without you." And just like that, the walls of professionalism crumbled. Nurses stepped out of the room, some wiping away tears. A doctor leaned against the hallway wall, his jaw tight. This was not just another patient. This was Jungkook, the heartbeat of something greater, and his fall had pulled every soul in the building into the abyss. In the hours that followed, Jimin refused to leave Jungkook's side. Even as specialists came and went, whispering diagnoses and theories, none of it mattered. All he could see was the flicker of defeat in Jungkook's eyes. But there was more, a shadow beneath his words, a secret he wasn't telling. And Jimin, shattered though he was, felt it like a storm gathering at the edges of a calm sea. What really happened that night on stage? Why did Jungkook collapse with no cause? And what was he hiding behind that brave, broken smile? The answers were buried deep beneath layers of loyalty, sacrifice, and something darker neither of them had yet dared to name. But this was only the beginning. Who gave him that injection? The head physician's voice thundered down the sterile hallway like a gunshot, cutting through the hush that had settled after Jungkook's collapse. His clipboard slammed against the nurse's station, startling the on-duty staff. Papers fluttered like frightened birds. Jimin, seated just outside Jungkook's room, clenched his fists. He hadn't slept. His black hoodie hung loosely off his shoulders, and his face was pale beneath the flickering emergency light. "What injection?" he asked, rising slowly. The doctor turned, grim. "You weren't told?" His gaze narrowed. He had a series of unauthorized neurostimulants in his bloodstream. Someone gave him something powerful, something not in his medical file. Jimin blinked. "Are you saying he was drugged?" "We're saying he was either reckless or manipulated, and neither bodes well." At that moment, the door to Jungkook's room creaked open, and a hoarse voice called out, "Jimin!" Jimin rushed in. Jungkook was sitting upright, eyes glassy. He looked smaller somehow, swallowed by the crisp hospital gown and the shadows under his eyes. His hand twitched only slightly, but it was enough to send Jimin running to him. "You moved," Jimin whispered, holding his hand. It hurts like hell, Jungkook murmured. But I think I felt something this time. Jimin smiled briefly. Then his face hardened. Jungkook, did someone give you something before you collapsed? Silence. Then Jungkook looked away. It wasn't like that. What do you mean? Jimin demanded, voice rising. You almost died. You couldn't feel your body for hours, and now they're saying... I asked for it, Jungkook snapped. Jimin's voice caught in his throat. You what? I was exhausted, Jungkook said, trembling. The tour, the rehearsals, the pressure, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't breathe, I just needed something, anything, and someone said they knew a guy. Jimin stepped back, eyes wide. You took illegal stimulants without telling anyone? I didn't know it would do this to me. But you risked your life, Jimin's voice cracked. Do you even understand what you mean to people, to me? Jungkook's jaw tightened. I didn't do it to hurt you. I just wanted to keep going. For all of us. The words hung like fog between them, heavy, suffocating. There was a knock on the door and Namjoon stepped in, eyes dark. We need to talk. Jimin stiffened. Did you know about this? Namjoon nodded once. I found out 2 days before the collapse. I tried to stop it, but Jungkook didn't listen. Jungkook's face flushed. You promised you wouldn't say anything. I promised if you stopped, Namjoon said. You didn't. Jimin turned away, seething. So both of you kept this from me? From everyone? It wasn't supposed to go this far, Jungkook whispered. But it had. Too far. Now the media was circling like vultures. The fandom was in panic, and their careers, all of it, hung by a thread. Then came the bigger blow. Late that night, as Jimin sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You want the truth about Jungkook? Check the security footage from the East Wing, 9:12 p.m. that night. His heart dropped. He sprinted back to the security office, breath shallow. The guard was reluctant, but Jimin had leverage. Fame had its privileges. The footage played in grainy silence. 9:11 p.m. Jungkook walking toward the dressing room alone. 9:12 p.m. a shadow followed. Hoodie, mask, small frame, not a staff member. They entered the room after him. 45 seconds later, Jungkook staggered out, gripping the wall. His face was pale. Something had clearly gone wrong. Jimin's breath hitched. This wasn't just a case of self-inflicted damage. Someone had done this. He slammed his fist on the desk. Rewind it. Zoom in on that person. The guard complied. The image sharpened just enough to see a glint of jewelry, a familiar bracelet. His eyes widened in disbelief. His voice was barely a whisper. No, it can't be. He staggered out of the office, his pulse racing, his mind splintering. If what he saw was real, then everything they thought they knew about the night Jungkook collapsed was a lie. And the real threat was still out there, closer than anyone dared to imagine. Inside that hospital, behind locked doors and whispered diagnoses, a deeper game was unfolding. One built on betrayal, hidden agendas, and secrets that could destroy everything. Jimin's jaw clenched. He was done being quiet. Tomorrow, he would confront the one person he never imagined suspecting. And the fallout would burn. Don't lie to me, Taeyong, not now. Not about this. The door to the studio slammed shut behind Jimin, the sound echoing like a gunshot against the cold concrete walls. His voice trembled not with fear but fury. Taeyong stood by the window, back turned, headphones hanging loose around his neck. A soft melody played in the background, something he'd been composing, but it sounded wrong now. Hollow. Taeyong didn't turn around. I have no idea what you're talking about. Jimin stepped forward, a USB drive clenched tight in his fist. This is what I'm talking about, the East Wing footage, the night Jungkook collapsed. You were there. The silence was deafening. You wore the bracelet, Jimin continued, voice cracking. The one you never take off. Don't insult me by pretending it wasn't you. Taeyong finally turned, slowly. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those usually warm, glimmering eyes, were colder than Jimin had ever seen. You don't understand. Then make me, Jimin snapped. Because right now, it looks like you followed him into that room, and something happened. something that nearly killed him. Tae-young crossed his arms, his jaw tight. I didn't give him anything. But you were there. I tried to stop it, Tae-young hissed. But he wouldn't listen. He was spiraling Jimin. He was taking things way before any of us knew. He didn't want help. He wanted escape. Jimin stared, stunned. You knew, and you didn't tell me? I begged him to come clean, Tae-young said, voice cracking. But he swore me to silence. Said if anyone found out, he'd be done. The label would bury it. The fans would turn. And you'd never forgive him. I could have helped him, Jimin whispered, his body suddenly feeling small, brittle. I should have helped him. But you were too busy being perfect, Tae-young snapped, and the room went still. Jimin blinked. What did you just say? You were always the golden one, Tae-young said, stepping closer. Always the one who held it all together. Jungkook didn't want to disappoint you. He worships you, Jimin. So when he started to crack, he hid it. And when he really started to fall, he came to me. Because he knew I was already broken. The confession cut deeper than any blade. Jimin opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat burned. I saw it coming, Tae-young continued, softer now. The insomnia. The hallucinations. He thought there was someone following him. He said he heard voices in the practice room. I thought it was just exhaustion, but then he stopped making sense. Why didn't you tell me? Jimin breathed. We could have gotten him help, real help. Because I didn't trust anyone, Tae-young said bitterly, not even myself. Jimin turned away, pressing his forehead against the cold mirror in the rehearsal room. His reflection stared back at him ghostly. You should have told me. I'm telling you now. A long silence passed. Then Tae-young spoke again, quieter. But there's something else, something you need to see. Later that night in Tae-young's apartment, they watched another video. It wasn't hospital security, it was footage from a backstage dressing room, grainy, taken 2 weeks before Jungkook's collapse. In it, Jungkook argued with someone, an unfamiliar man in a gray hoodie. The audio was patchy, but the tension was clear. The man handed Jungkook something, a vial. Jungkook hesitated, then pocketed it. What the hell is that? Jimin whispered. Tae-young shook his head. I don't know, but the guy? He's not staff. I ran facial recognition through a private contact. And? He's a former pharmacology student, expelled for experimenting with neural inhibitors. He vanished 3 years ago, and now he's back hanging around idle dressing rooms. Jimin's blood went cold. So it wasn't just burnout. Jungkook was targeted. Or manipulated, Tae-young said. He may have agreed to it, but he didn't understand what he was taking. They both sat in silence, the weight of it all suffocating. The next morning, Jimin returned to the hospital. Jungkook was awake, more alert, but there was a guardedness in his gaze, a haunted look. You remember the guy in the hoodie? Jimin asked gently, sitting beside him. Jungkook flinched. I thought he could help. Help with what? Jungkook looked down at his hands. The noise, the constant need to be everything. I was losing pieces of myself, Young. Every time I smiled for the camera, I lost another part. I didn't want to disappear. Jimin gripped his hand. You never had to carry that alone. Jungkook looked up, his voice barely a whisper. But I did, because I saw what it did to you, the way you swallowed your own pain. I learned it from you. The words hit Jimin like a punch to the chest. He hadn't realized how deeply his silence had been a blueprint, how his own method of surviving had taught Jungkook how to hide. They sat there, two broken boys in the quiet hum of the hospital ward, holding the weight of their choices between them. But outside, the storm was brewing louder. News of Jungkook's hospitalization had leaked. Rumors were spreading like wildfire. Anonymous accounts posted cryptic messages. A photo of the vial surfaced online. And worst of all, an envelope had been delivered to the hospital. Inside was a letter. If he talks, he dies. This isn't just about your little band. It's bigger than you. Stay quiet. Jimin read it twice. Then he turned to Jungkook and said calmly, We're going to find out who's doing this. Because now it wasn't just about healing. It was about war. You think I'm afraid to burn with you? Jimin's voice was a knife, sharp and unwavering, as he stood in the boardroom of Hybe, eyes blazing across the table at the executives who had once praised him, protected him, paraded him like a prince. Now they sat silent, stunned, unsure what to do with this version of him, untamed, furious, and utterly unapologetic. Chairman Du cleared his throat, steepling his fingers. "Jimin, this isn't the place to—" "Isn't the place?" Jimin barked a laugh, venom curling at the edge of every word. "You mean the place where you've buried every scandal with a checkbook and a smile? The place where we signed our lives away at 19 because we trusted you to keep us safe?" A heavy silence followed. Namjoon shifted uncomfortably in his seat beside Jimin, rubbing his temple. "We're not accusing anyone, we're just asking for transparency." "Transparency?" Jimin turned to him, eyes wild. They knew. Someone on the inside let that man into our dressing rooms, and now Jungkook's body is barely holding itself together, and you want to ask for transparency? Chairman Du finally spoke, voice cool. "There's no proof anyone from the company was involved. If there's a breach, we'll investigate it thoroughly." Jimin tossed the envelope onto the table. The letter slid out, the black ink like poison on the sterile white paper. "If? That's not a breach, it's a threat. And if I get one more half-hearted apology while Jungkook fights for his life, I swear." "Jimin." Namjoon's voice was low, cautioning. "Careful." Jimin stared at him, the betrayal sharp and sudden. "Careful?" he whispered. "He's your brother, too." Namjoon's eyes darkened, but he didn't respond. Not yet. The meeting dissolved into chaos. PR advisors scrambled, legal consultants murmured, but Jimin didn't hear any of it. His pulse thundered in his ears as he stormed out, fists clenched. Behind him, the door slammed shut with a finality that felt like exile. Back at the hospital, Jungkook was watching reruns of an old variety show, the one where they all wore ridiculous wigs and danced to 90 seconds K-pop. His laugh was soft, but real. When Jimin entered the room, he turned and smiled, though his eyes were tired. "You look like you just punched a wall." "I nearly punched the CEO." Jungkook's smile faded. "What happened?" "They want to bury this," Jimin said, sinking into the chair beside him. "They're more worried about stock prices than your spine." Jungkook exhaled slowly. "I figured." Jimin looked at him. Really looked. The way his shoulders hunched, the way his eyes darted to the corners of the room as if expecting shadows to speak. Something inside him had cracked, but he was still here, breathing, fighting. And then Jungkook said something that made Jimin's blood freeze. "I don't think it's just the company." Jimin leaned in. "What do you mean?" Jungkook's voice dropped. "There's a name I heard, whispered in the hall that night. Just before I passed out, someone said, 'Tell the Silver Syndicate it's done.'" Jimin blinked. "The Silver Syndicate? That's urban legend shit." "Or cover story shit," Jungkook murmured. "What if it's real? What if this goes way beyond just me? What if I was just the first?" The words left a weight in the room that made the air feel thick and dangerous. Jimin sat back, processing. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. "Check your locker at the dance studio, tonight. Come alone." He showed Jungkook the text. "No," Jungkook said instantly. "Don't go alone." "I have to." "It could be a trap." Jimin smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Then I'll finally meet the devil face to face." That night, the studio was dark, except for the red exit signs that cast long shadows across the floor. The mirrors reflected 1,000 versions of Jimin, each one more nervous than the last. Locker 09, the one Jungkook always used. He opened it slowly, bracing for, he didn't know what. A letter? Another syringe? A recording? But it was worse. A photograph. Jimin pulled it out with shaking hands. In the photo, Jungkook, unconscious, lying on a steel table, wires attached to his head, machines surrounding him, and someone standing over him with a syringe mid-injection. Their face was covered, but the watch on their wrist was unmistakable. Gold, vintage, limited edition. Only one person they knew wore that watch. Yoongi. Jimin stumbled back, almost dropping the photo. No, it didn't make sense. Yoongi had been missing for weeks. Said he was in Japan working on solo material. He hadn't visited Jungkook once. Was that why? He drove back to his apartment like a man possessed, heart slamming against his ribs. Every light felt like an interrogation. Every silence between honks and engine growls felt like an accusation. When he finally burst through the door, the apartment was dark. He flipped the lights. There, sitting at the kitchen counter, was Yoongi. "Hey," he said quietly, as if nothing had happened. Jimin stared, speechless. Then he stepped forward, tossed the photo onto the counter. "What the fuck is this?" Yoongi looked at it, didn't flinch. "I was trying to save him." Jimin blinked. "Save him? You drugged him." "I was working undercover," Yoongi said. "For 2 months, I infiltrated the ring that's been distributing illegal neural suppressants to idols. They were targeting rookies at first, then trainees. Jungkook wasn't supposed to be on their radar. But someone sold his name. He was marked." Jimin's throat tightened. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because if I broke cover, they would have killed him, or worse, used him to send a message." Jimin staggered back, mind spinning. "So, you let him suffer. Alone. Let me suffer. You disappeared. And now you want forgiveness?" Yoongi's voice was calm but sharp. "I want justice." And in that moment, Jimin saw it. The darkness behind Yoongi's eyes, the fire he'd buried, the weight of doing what no one else could. They were all broken in different ways. Jimin collapsed into the chair across from him. "Then let's burn this syndicate to the ground." Yoongi nodded. "But we'll need help." Jimin looked up. "From who?" Yoongi smirked, a shadow crossing his face. "From the one who started it." "You're saying the founder of the Silver Syndicate is one of us?" Jimin's voice shattered against the walls of Yoongi's apartment like glass dropped on concrete. His hand trembled as he gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. Yoongi didn't blink. He simply nodded once, slow and heavy, like each motion carried the weight of a death sentence. "Not one of us," Yoongi said, eyes fixed on Jimin. "But someone who was close enough. Someone who knew our routines, our weaknesses, our fears." Jimin's heart pounded in his ears. "Who?" Yoongi hesitated. "Manager Kang." Silence. The name felt like a slap. Manager Kang, the quiet, loyal shadow who had followed them for years through world tours, sleepless rehearsals, injuries, breakdowns, victories. He was the one who brought them hot drinks when they were sick. The one who picked them up at 3 a.m. after grueling schedules. The one they trusted. "No," Jimin said flatly. "That's impossible." Yoongi reached into a drawer and pulled out a flash drive. He tossed it onto the table. Surveillance footage, audio recordings, payment logs. He's been moving funds through a shell company tied to an underground network sourcing experimental enhancers. He's been testing them on idols. Jungkook was his prize. Jimin grabbed the drive, but his hands were shaking so badly he dropped it. Why? Yoongi's jaw clenched. Because the industry rewards perfection, and perfection isn't human. He stood, walking to the window. Rain started to fall, tapping softly on the glass like it was trying to whisper secrets. I followed Kang for weeks. He's running a program called Project Horizon. It started as performance enhancement, fast reflexes, better endurance. But now, it's about control, obedience. They're experimenting with compounds that rewrite neurological pathways, make artists dependent, submissive, profitable. And Jungkook? Jimin's voice cracked. He was part of this? He wasn't supposed to be, but he became too perfect, too powerful, too visible. They needed to test how far they could push him, and when he cracked, Kang pulled the trigger. Jimin sat down hard, the air punched from his lungs. He stared at the drive in front of him like it might detonate. Does Jungkook know? Not everything. Only that someone gave him something, and it almost killed him. Jimin rubbed his face with trembling hands. And if we expose Kang? He'll kill to protect the operation, Yoongi said. He has connections in the media, in the medical board, maybe even the police. Jimin looked up. Fire, now replacing the shock. Then we don't just expose him, we destroy him. Yoongi smiled grimly. You're finally talking my language. They spent the night devising a plan, gathering all the names Kang had contact with, the places he frequented, the interns he'd recruited as his runners. It was bigger than they thought. There were producers involved, former idols, even doctors at private clinics specializing in VIP health solutions. By dawn, Jimin was staring at a whiteboard filled with names and arrows and red circles. This isn't just an abuse ring. It's a machine. Yoongi nodded. And like every machine, it needs fuel, fear, silence, loyalty. Jimin turned to him. Then we starve it. Later that day, Jimin visited Jungkook again, now armed with the truth but unsure how to deliver it. Jungkook looked better. Color was slowly returning to his cheeks. He managed to sit up without wincing too hard, but his eyes, those deep, intuitive eyes, saw right through Jimin the moment he walked in. "What is it?" Jimin sat down. "I found out who gave you the drug." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "Yoongi?" Jimin shook his head. "He was trying to save you. He was undercover. The real culprit, it's Kang." Jungkook went still, completely still. "No," he whispered. "I have proof," Jimin said, reaching into his bag for the flash drive. "Everything. Financial trails, video, audio. He targeted you, Jungkook. He knew you trusted him. That's why he picked you." Jungkook stared at the floor. I remember. The night I collapsed, I saw someone in the hallway. I thought I was hallucinating, but it was him." His hands began to tremble. "He smiled at me, Hyung. Smiled. Like he was proud." Jimin's eyes burned with fury. He reached over, took Jungkook's shaking hand in his own. "We're gonna take him down, together, but I need to know, can you handle it?" Jungkook looked up. "I'm not the same anymore. Something in me broke." "You're still here," Jimin whispered. "That's enough for me." There was a long pause. Then Jungkook said something Jimin hadn't expected. "I want to be the one to end him." Jimin blinked. "Jungkook? I trusted him. I loved him like family, and he used me like a lab rat." His voice cracked. "Let me face him." Jimin studied him. There was pain in his eyes, yes, but beneath it, there was fire, strength, a will to rise. "All right," Jimin said finally. "But we do it smart. We do it loud. And we don't stop until there's nothing left of his empire." Jungkook nodded once, like a soldier readying for war. The first strike came unexpectedly. The next day, every major news outlet received an anonymous tip. Project Horizon, the idle drug program hidden in plain sight. Attached were files, audio samples, a preview of what the world was about to uncover. Chase followed. Hybe was silent, but Kang vanished. Disappeared from his office. Deleted from the company roster, his apartment, abandoned, his car, missing. That night, Jimin's phone rang. "Unknown number," a voice whispered. "You thought this was about Jungkook?" Click. Line dead. Jimin's heart dropped. He turned to Jungkook, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. No, this wasn't over. Because the Silver Syndicate had just been cornered and a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. The room was dark except for the flickering light of the television, an old music video playing on loop. Jungkook's voice echoed softly from the screen, a younger, freer version of himself dancing beneath neon lights surrounded by his brothers, unaware of the storm that would one day tear his body and soul in half. Jimin sat in the corner of the room, watching both the screen and the sleeping figure in the hospital bed. Jungkook stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, his face twisted in pain. Nightmares again. Jimin stood and gently adjusted the blanket over him. He brushed the damp strands of hair from Jungkook's forehead and whispered, "I'll burn the world before I let them take you again." A knock on the window startled him. Yoongi's silhouette stood in the hallway, his expression grim. Jimin met him outside the room where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the smell of disinfectant clung to everything. "They're mobilizing," Yoongi said. "Who?" "The Silver Syndicate. They've started scrubbing records, deleting names, moving money offshore. They've gone full panic mode." Jimin narrowed his eyes. "That means we hit a nerve." Yoongi hesitated, then added, "We found Kang." Jimin's breath hitched. "Where?" "An isolated villa in Jeju. He's not alone. We have confirmation he's being protected. There's security, encrypted networks, and a new subject." Jimin's jaw tightened. "Another idol?" Yoongi nodded. "A rookie, female, 17. She disappeared last week after her debut showcase. They faked her schedule and told the media she was on vocal rest." "Fuck. That's not the worst of it." Yoongi pulled out his phone and showed him a photo. She was injected with a stronger compound. They're experimenting with the next stage. Jimin stared at the image of the girl. Tiny, eyes sunken, expression vacant, and something in him shattered. She's just a kid. She'll die within days unless we get her out, Yoongi said. And Kang knows we're coming. He's ready. Jimin was quiet for a long moment. Then, voice low, "We go tonight." The rain pounded Jeju like a warning. Jimin, Yoongi, and a small team of trusted allies, some from inside the company, others from Yoongi's hidden network, arrived just past midnight. The villa was buried deep in the forest, surrounded by private security, silent, watchful. They approached under the cover of trees, black hoodies soaked, nerves stretched thin. Inside, Kang was sipping tea like a man on vacation. His face was calm, too calm. He wore the same silver-framed glasses he always had, the kind that made him seem gentle, fatherly even. But Jimin knew now it was all performance. A monster wrapped in patience. CCTV footage showed the girl restrained in a back room, her vitals monitored by machines, her veins dark from whatever they'd put inside her. A doctor stood beside her, clipboard in hand. Jimin spoke through the earpiece, voice cold. "We get her out first, then Kang." Yoongi responded, "Copy. Disabling cameras in 3, 2. Darkness. The monitors inside the villa went black. The guards rushed to their radios, confused. That's when Yoongi's team moved. Silently, precisely. Jimin burst into the back room with 2 others, his breath shallow. The girl was strapped down, IVs in both arms, eyes fluttering open at the sound. She looked at him, dazed, whispered, "Am I dead?" "No," Jimin said, quickly unstrapping her. "You're coming home." Gunfire erupted outside. Jimin lifted the girl in his arms and ran. Yoongi's voice barked through the comms, "They're armed heavily! Get out now!" The girl moaned in pain. Her skin was clammy, cold. Jimin's legs burned as he reached the van waiting in the woods. He handed her off to the medic and turned to run back. But someone was already standing behind him. Manager Kang. He stepped from the shadows, calm, composed. The moonlight caught the faint smile on his lips. "I raised you boys so well," he said. "Loyal, brave, predictable." Jimin didn't respond. His fists curled. "You don't understand the system," Kang continued. "You never did. You think fame is earned? It's built, manufactured. Every award, every stage, I made sure you had it. You think you were special? No, you were controlled. And you thrived because of it." "You almost killed him," Jimin hissed. "You destroyed Jungkook's body. You broke his mind." "And yet," Kang said softly, "he still sings, doesn't he? Still inspires millions. Suffering creates art, Jimin. It always has." Jimin lunged. Kang dodged barely, but it was enough to send him stumbling backward. Yoongi appeared out of the dark like a shadow. "Don't," he said sharply. "We need him alive." "I want to see him bleed," Jimin growled, chest heaving. Yoongi stepped between them. "You will, but not here. We take him to Seoul. We expose him, his name, his crimes, his entire goddamn empire." Kang smirked as the zip ties snapped around his wrists. "You think this ends with me? You think I'm the monster? I'm just the gatekeeper. There are others." Jimin leaned in close, whispering, "Then give me their names, one by one, or I'll make sure they never find your body." Kang laughed high and broken. "You're too late. The machine already has its next idol. You're just ashes clinging to a dying flame." Jimin punched him. Once, hard. Yoongi didn't stop him. Back in Seoul, the girl survived. Barely. Doctors flushed her system, ran tests, and confirmed the horrifying truth. Neural collapse was imminent. But she woke up days later, clutching Jimin's hand, tears running down her face. "You saved me," she whispered. Jimin couldn't speak. He just held her hand tighter. The media exploded. Leaked documents, footage, confessions, anonymous whistleblowers. The Silver Syndicate's name was now public, and heads were rolling. But Jimin wasn't celebrating. Neither was Jungkook, because they knew Kang wasn't lying. There were others. and one name had surfaced in the recovered logs from Kang's laptop, a name they both knew, a name that hit like betrayal twice sharpened. Kim Sik-jin. Jin. Their Hyung. The one who'd gone to the military early. The one who vanished after his discharge. The one who, according to the files, had funded the first shipment of experimental compounds for controlled group trials. Jimin stared at the screen, then at Yoongi, who looked just as stunned. "No," Jimin whispered. "Not him. Anyone but him." But there it was. The bank records. The emails. The code name, White Fox. Jin wasn't missing. He was working in the shadows. And now the final battle wouldn't be against strangers. It would be against one of their own. The wind cut through the rooftop like a knife, sharp and icy even in the late summer air. Jimin stood at the edge, looking down at the glittering city of Seoul, a world pulsing with light and ignorance. People were out there laughing, working, living, while a war was brewing in the quiet, rotting veins of the industry they worshipped. Behind him, the door creaked open. Yoongi's voice broke the silence. "He's here." Jimin turned slowly. His heartbeat thudded against his ribs like a war drum. "How did he respond?" Jimin asked. "He said if we're going to accuse him, we better do it to his face." Jimin scoffed, looking away. "That sounds like him." "He's in the studio, alone, said he'd wait for you." Jimin didn't move. Yoongi stepped closer. "Do you want me to go with you?" "No," Jimin said quietly. "If it's really him, I need to see it myself." He walked down the fire escape like a man heading into judgment, each step echoing with memories. Jin's laugh backstage, his arms slung around Jungkook, the late-night talks on tour buses, the way he always looked out for them like a big brother, even when no one asked him to. The hallway to the studio felt longer than usual, darker somehow. Jimin's fingers hesitated on the door handle before he finally pushed it open. Jin was standing by the mixing table, back to the door. He didn't turn. Jimin stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him. "Hyung." Jin turned. He looked normal, casual. Black shirt, hair slightly longer, hands in his pockets. But his eyes, God, his eyes, they weren't the same. There was a weight in them, an edge, like something had been carved out and never returned. "You really think I did this?" Jin said softly. "No anger, just exhaustion." Jimin stepped forward. "Tell me you didn't." Jin didn't answer. Jimin's voice rose. "Tell me the files are fake. Tell me Kang used your name, that this is all some elaborate setup." Still, Jin said nothing. Jimin's heart sank. "Please." Jin sighed and finally looked him in the eye. "They're not fake." The silence that followed was brutal. Jimin swallowed hard, the back of his throat burning. "Why?" Jin looked down. "Because we were dying." Jimin stared, uncomprehending. "Every year, one more of us broke," Jin continued, voice low. "Mental breakdowns, panic attacks, collapsed lungs, torn ligaments, depression, suicidal thoughts. I watched each of you fall apart. I watched you bleed for this industry, and they clapped and demanded more." Jimin took a shaky breath. "So you joined them. You helped create the very thing that nearly killed Jungkook." "No," Jin snapped, eyes flashing for the first time. "I tried to create something different. Project Horizon was meant to protect us, enhance recovery, suppress trauma, give idols the strength to keep going without burning out. It was supposed to be ethical, measured. But it wasn't." Jin looked away. "It got out of control. Investors wanted faster results. Kang twisted the trials, brought in unapproved compounds, and then I was already in too deep." "You funded it," Jimin whispered, rage and disbelief crashing over his face like thunder. "You sold your soul for a system that chews people up and spits them out. And you let it take him. You let it take Jungkook." "I never meant for that to happen," Jin said, stepping forward. "He was never supposed to be part of the trial group. Kang went rogue. When I found out, I tried to pull him out." "But you didn't!" Jimin shouted. "You disappeared. You didn't come to the hospital. You didn't answer any of our calls. You ran." Jin's face cracked. "Because I knew if I saw him like that, I wouldn't be able to live with myself." Jimin laughed bitterly, wiping a tear from his cheek. You don't get to cry, Hyung. Not now. Not after this. I didn't come back to justify anything, Jin said. I came to end it. Jimin narrowed his eyes. How? I have the names, the locations, every account, every lab, every person involved in the program. I've been gathering it since the moment I left the military. I was working inside the system to kill it from the core. Jimin's voice dropped. Why now? Jin took a long breath. Because Jungkook woke up, and you didn't stop. Jimin stepped forward, barely inches from Jin now. So what you think if you hand over a few documents, I'll forgive you, that we'll go back to being brothers? No, Jin said softly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to do one thing, right before the world tears us apart. Jimin stared at him, then turned and walked toward the door. Before he left, he said without looking back, You're coming with me. You're going to hand over every name, every detail, and you're going to stand in front of the world and confess. And if I don't? Jimin looked over his shoulder, fire in his eyes. Then I'll bury you myself. The next morning, Jimin, Jin, and Yoongi held a press conference. Hybe tried to block it. Lawyers threatened, sponsors pulled back, but the world was already watching. Jin stood at the microphone and told the truth. About Project Horizon. About the idols it destroyed. About the girl they'd saved. About Jungkook. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just told the story. And when it was done, Jimin stepped forward, looked into the cameras and said, This isn't redemption. This is responsibility, and this is only the beginning. The headlines exploded. Global Idol admits role in idol drug experimentation. Hybe in crisis after confession shocks industry. Jimin and Jungkook, survivors turn whistleblowers. That night, back in the hospital, Jungkook watched the broadcast from his bed. His hand trembled on the remote, his eyes filled with tears. He came back, he whispered. Jimin walked in quietly and sat beside him. I'm sorry, Jungkook said, for everything. You don't have to be, Jimin replied. You survived. That's enough. Jungkook looked at him, voice soft. Is it really over? Jimin shook his head slowly. No, but it's the beginning of the end. Outside, the world roared with scandal. But inside that room, for the first time in weeks, there was a strange, fragile peace. Even if the storm wasn't over, they had finally found each other in the wreckage. And they weren't alone anymore. The flashbulbs were relentless. Jimin stepped out of the courthouse with Yoongi at his side, the weight of global attention pressing on his chest like a second heartbeat. Reporters screamed questions from behind the barricades, cameras angled like loaded weapons, each flash a threat disguised as curiosity. Is BTS disbanding? Were there more victims? Did Hybe know about the experiments? Where is Jungkook now? Jimin didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. His hands were cold, his lips dry. Somewhere behind them, Jin was still inside giving sworn testimony in front of a special investigation panel. An official indictment of Hybe's former board members had just been signed. 3 doctors were under arrest. The girl they saved in Jeju was under protection. But even as justice crawled forward, it still felt like the edge of something darker, more bottomless. Yoongi leaned in. You okay? Jimin didn't respond. He wasn't sure if okay was a real thing anymore. Back in the van, he stared at his reflection in the dark window. Pale skin, hollow eyes, a face the world once adored, now cracked from too many secrets carried too long. The driver spoke without turning. You should see this. He handed Jimin a phone with an open article on the screen. Breaking. Former Hybe chairman found dead in private holding cell. Jimin's throat tightened. He read it again. Death by asphyxiation. Ruled a suicide pending further investigation. Note found. They got to me. You're next. Yoongi exhaled slowly. Fuck. Jimin leaned back, the blood draining from his face. They're tying up loose ends. Yoongi's jaw tightened, which means this isn't over. Jungkook sat alone in his hospital room, bathed in golden light from the setting Sunday. His recovery had been slow, agonizing, but he was walking again barely. His nerves still screamed at him when he moved too quickly. His hand still trembled when the room got too quiet, but he was breathing, alive. The TV was on mute, playing the news. He could read the captions just fine. Another HYBE executive resigns amid backlash. More idols come forward with allegations. White Fox, hero or traitor? He turned it off. He didn't want to see Jin's face right now. Didn't know how to feel about it. Didn't even know how to feel about his own. The door opened. He didn't look up. I don't want visitors. Well, tough shit. It was Taehyung. Jungkook finally glanced over. Taehyung looked tired, but somehow stronger. He tossed a bag of tangerines onto the side table like it was tradition. You're still dramatic, Jungkook muttered. You're still stupid, Taehyung replied. A beat passed. Then Jungkook said, voice low, I heard about the chairman. Yeah? And Jin? Yeah. Silence returned like an unwanted guest. Then Taehyung sat down and sighed. Why didn't you tell me, Kook? I didn't want to be a burden. Taehyung looked at him like he wanted to throw a chair. You think I care about that? You think I'd rather lose you than carry you? Jungkook looked away, his voice cracked. I thought I was protecting you. You weren't, Taehyung said, soft now. You were hiding, and it almost killed you. Jungkook swallowed hard. I still see it, the lights, the stage. Then nothing, just black. You're not there anymore, Taehyung whispered. You're here, with us. Jungkook blinked rapidly, then, almost childlike, am I still part of us? Taehyung stood up, walked over, and pulled Jungkook into a hug. You are us. And for the first time in a long time, Jungkook let himself cry. Meanwhile, in a quiet conference room inside a high-security government facility, Jin sat across from a federal agent in a suit, too clean, too precise. The room was cold, no windows. One light overhead. You understand the risk, the agent said. I do. You're testifying against people who funded global media empires. These men don't just own companies, they own systems. They are the system. I know, Jin replied. And yet you're willing to expose them all? I already started. The agent paused, then slid a folder across the table. Inside were black and white photographs, surveillance stills, documents, names. Jin's eyes stopped on one image. His breath caught. You recognize him? The agent asked. Jin nodded slowly. That's Min-Yuk Park, the agent said. Former producer, disappeared from the public eye 4 years ago. But we traced wire transfers from his name to private biotech labs in Sweden and Hong Kong. He's running a new variant of Project Horizon. And he's recruiting. Jin closed the folder. Where? We believe he's operating out of Macau, off the grid, a city of masks. Then that's where I'm going, Jin said. The agent raised a brow. You think you're still in the game? I don't need to be in the game, Jin said calmly. I just need to end it. Back at the hospital, Jimin sat at Jungkook's side, both of them watching the sun dip behind the skyline, orange and red painted across the walls like fire licking through the glass. Jungkook broke the silence. You think we'll ever be on stage again? Jimin didn't answer immediately. Then, I think we already are. Jungkook looked at him, confused. Jimin smiled softly. The world's watching. We're standing. That's a stage. Jungkook chuckled. That's cheesy. You love it. I hate it. They both laughed. A small, precious thing. But then the monitor on the table beeped. A new message flashed across Jimin's phone. No number, just a location and a line. Final phase begins in Macau. He's waiting. Jungkook's eyes scanned the message. What is that? Jimin looked out the window. The skyline glittered like a promise and a threat. The last door, he said. And whoever's behind it, they've been planning this longer than we've been alive. Jungkook took a breath. Then we don't go alone. Jimin looked at him. I'm coming with you, Jungkook said, voice steady. Even if I crawl. Jimin's throat tightened. Kook! I need to see this end. Jimin nodded slowly. Then whispered, then let's finish it. And somewhere across the sea, behind private jets and veiled names, a man watched them on a monitor, smiling, waiting, because for him the show was just beginning. The humidity of Macau hit like a wet fist the moment Jimin and Jungkook stepped off the private plane. The city shimmered with neon promises and lies, a labyrinth of money, power, and secrecy. Casinos blinked like watchful eyes across the skyline, and the streets pulsed with bodies too busy to notice they were dancing on the edge of a machine built on silence. Jungkook leaned heavily on his cane, his left leg dragging slightly behind. Each step was pain, each breath was defiance. Jimin watched him out of the corner of his eye, torn between pride and guilt. "You sure about this?" Jimin asked quietly as they entered the waiting car, its windows tinted darker than the truth. Jungkook adjusted the brace on his knee. "I need to look him in the eye. I need to know who tried to erase me." Yoongi was already inside the car, laptop open, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. Satellite picked up increased thermal activity in the South District. Minhyuk's been shifting his people underground. He's expecting company. "Good," Jimin muttered. "Let him." Yoongi didn't look up. "One more thing. He knows we're here." Jimin met his eyes. "How?" Yoongi turned the laptop around. On the screen was a live video feed from the security cam in their hotel hallway outside their suite. The footage had been emailed to Yoongi from an anonymous address with one line attached. "You brought the lamb back to the slaughter." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "This isn't surveillance," he said. "It's theater." "He's provoking us," Jimin added. "He wants a reaction." Yoongi nodded. "And if we give him one, he wins." Jimin exhaled slowly. "Then we don't react. We act." That night they met Jin in a low-lit jazz bar hidden beneath the bones of a forgotten cathedral. He was dressed in black, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He looked thinner, older. His eyes were darker than before, like something had died in them and hadn't come back. He barely looked at Jungkook when he walked in. Jungkook didn't look at him either. Jin slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything you need to access Minhyuk's servers. There's a signal vault under the casino district. He's been running the new trials from below, hidden under the facade of a charity-funded neurology clinic." Jungkook's voice was sharp. "Why would he risk everything again?" Jin took a sip of whiskey. "Because he doesn't believe he's risking anything. He thinks he's already won." "Why?" Jimin asked. Jin finally looked at him. "Because the next version of Horizon isn't for idols anymore." They froze. "What do you mean?" Yoongi asked. Jin's lips tightened. "He's offering it to billionaires, tech moguls, political leaders. A permanent rewiring of the human brain. No fatigue, no fear, no doubt, just pure programmable obedience." Jungkook's voice was barely audible. "That's not performance enhancement, that's slavery." Jin nodded. "Exactly. And if he succeeds, it won't just be our world that ends. It'll be every world that was ever free." The next day, under fake names and with forged passes, they entered the clinic. It was too clean, too quiet. Nurses in perfect uniforms smiled with hollow eyes. The halls were white and sterile. Jimin kept his head down, Jungkook limping beside him, Yoongi feeding instructions through a hidden earpiece. They reached the lower levels using an elevator with no buttons, only a key card. Jin had given them one. As the doors opened underground, the silence changed. It became surgical, mechanical, cold. Rows of glass rooms stretched into the distance. Inside them, people sat in reclined chairs, IVs in their arms, eyes rolled back, muscles twitching. They weren't patients. They were prototypes. Jungkook couldn't look away. He reached one of the windows, hand trembling, pressing against the glass. A boy, not older than 16, sat strapped to a chair, his mouth slightly open, a thin line of drool on his chin. Monitors flashed brainwave data above his head, pulsing red. Jimin pulled Jungkook back. "We need to move." But before they could take another step, a voice rang out over the intercom. "I must say, I didn't expect the sacrificial lamb to return in person. Welcome home, Jungkook." The lights dimmed. Jin's voice exploded in Jimin's earpiece. "Abort! It's a trap! Get out now!" Doors slammed shut. The hallway locked behind them. And then Minhyuk Park stepped out from the shadows, flanked by two men in black suits. He looked nothing like his old photos. His face was leaner, sharper, lips curled in a permanent smirk. He wore a white lab coat over a black turtleneck. His eyes, though, were still the same, intelligent, hungry, and terrifying. "Jungkook," he said, nodding like they were old friends. "You look well, all things considered." Jimin stepped in front of him. "One step closer, and I swear." Minhyuk raised a hand. "Please, I didn't come here to fight. I came to offer you a seat at the table." Jungkook's expression didn't change. "You tried to end me." "I tried to perfect you," Minhyuk corrected. "And you survived. Do you have any idea what that means? You're proof, living evidence that it works." Jungkook's hand twitched toward the cane. "You're not a scientist," he said. "You're a trafficker. You trade in lives and call it vision." Minhyuk stepped closer. "And what are you now, Jungkook? A martyr? A ghost? You think you've come here to shut me down? You are me. I built you." "No," Jungkook whispered. "You broke me. I built myself again." Minhyuk's smile cracked. "That's a shame." Jimin moved first, throwing the flash grenade Yoongi had packed for emergencies. Light exploded. They ran. Through steel corridors, alarms blaring, footsteps echoing behind them. Jungkook limped hard but kept moving. Jimin led the way. Jin's voice screamed coordinates in their ears. Yoongi triggered the backup plan from a remote van across the street. The building exploded into chaos. By the time they reached the rooftop, a helicopter was already in the sky. Jungkook collapsed against the doorframe, gasping. Jimin pulled him up. "We're almost out." But as the chopper lowered a rope ladder, a single shot rang out. Jimin turned in horror. Jungkook stood frozen, hand pressed to his side. Blood poured between his fingers. Minhyuk stood at the stairwell with a pistol. "I told you," he shouted. "You brought the lamb back to the slaughter." Yoongi's voice roared in Jimin's earpiece. "Get him out, now!" Jimin grabbed Jungkook, dragging him toward the ladder. He was slipping, bleeding, fading. Jin dropped from the chopper, helping haul him up. Jimin climbed behind them, hands red. As the helicopter rose into the smoky Macau sky, Minhyuk grew smaller beneath them, still smiling, still untouched. Jimin held Jungkook's face, whispering over and over, "Stay with me, stay with me." Jungkook's eyes fluttered. "I'm tired," he whispered. Jimin shook his head. "You don't get to die. Not now. Not after everything." Below them, the city burned with secrets. Above them, a life hung by a thread. And the world was about to watch it all unravel. The emergency room reeked of blood and adrenaline. The helicopter blades had barely slowed when Jungkook was pulled from Jimin's arms, limp, drenched in crimson. Doctors barked orders over the static of radios and the shrill sound of a heart monitor slipping into chaos. Jimin stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, frozen in place as the doors slammed behind the gurney. He didn't speak, couldn't. Yoongi came up beside him, equally breathless, covered in ash and gunpowder. "Where is he?" Jimin asked, voice cracking like shattered glass. "Trauma or, he's stable, for now." Minhyuk shot him, point blank. Young didn't respond. He smiled, Hyung. He smiled like he'd won. Yoongi took a slow breath. Maybe he did. Maybe just long enough to remind us that monsters don't need cages. They just need enough silence. Jimin turned to him, trembling. "Then we don't go silent." Inside, Jungkook's blood soaked the tile. His pulse danced in erratic rhythm on the monitor as the surgeons cut away his clothes and pushed needles into his veins. They cracked open his chest, dug in with desperate hands to stop the bleeding. Jimin sat outside the glass window, his fists clenched until his knuckles turned white. He thought of the first time he saw Jungkook 15 years old, a hurricane of talent and nerves. He thought of every stage they'd shared, every late-night talk, every moment of pain masked by laughter. He thought of how Jungkook would dance like he was trying to outrun something. Now he knew what it was. It was them. It was this. Jin arrived an hour later. No disguise this time, no hat, no glasses, just his face, raw and tired and heavy. "How bad?" he asked. Jimin didn't look at him. A rib shattered and pierced his lung. The bullet tore through muscle. They say, if he makes it through tonight, he'll live. Jin lowered his head. "And if he doesn't?" he whispered. Jimin's eyes glistened. Then I finish what he started, and I don't care how much of me burns in the process. Jin sat beside him. He didn't go there for vengeance. He went there for truth, Jimin said, and truth almost killed him. Silence wrapped around them like a vice. Then Jimin added softer. He went there because I let him believe he was alone. You didn't, Jin said. You brought him back. That's the only reason we even had a chance. The night dragged on. Somewhere past 3 a.m., the surgeon emerged, scrubbing blood from his gloves. He's alive, he said, but he's not out of the woods. Jimin stood, legs weak. Can I see him? The doctor hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. He's unconscious. The ICU was quiet, except for the beeping machines and the low hum of oxygen. Jungkook lay still, pale, tubes in his nose, wires trailing from his chest. He looked fragile, wrong. Jimin sat beside him, slowly reaching for his hand. I'm here, he whispered. I know you can't hear me, but I need you to fight. His voice broke. Because it's not done, Kook. We're not done. We were never just songs and spotlights. We were brothers. And they tried to tear that apart. They tried to make you forget who you were. He squeezed Jungkook's hand. But I never did, not for a second. Behind the glass, Jin watched, unmoving. Then he turned away. Later that morning, the world woke to headlines more explosive than any before. Minhyuk Park, wanted for attempted murder, global warrant issued. Project Horizon leaks reveal plans for behavioral control market. Jungkook hospitalized after exposing syndicate tied to idol industry. And then came the anonymous video upload. Yoongi's voice narrated over footage taken from the Macau facility. Images of unconscious trainees, of black market drug shipments, of emails between Minhyuk and board members of major global companies. They made art out of suffering, built palaces from silence, but we are no longer quiet. The clip ended with Jimin's voice. One sentence. You don't get to own people anymore. The video went viral in minutes. Minhyuk disappeared again. But now, the world was hunting him. A week passed. Jungkook awoke slowly, painfully. Jimin was asleep beside his bed, head resting on his crossed arms. Jungkook's lips were dry, but he managed to whisper. Hyung. Jimin jolted upright, wide-eyed. You're awake, he said, smiling through tears. You came back. Jungkook's voice was faint. Did we win? Jimin took his hand. Not yet. Jungkook smiled weakly. Then, let's finish it. Outside, the world had changed. Whistleblowers came forward. Companies cut ties. Investigations spread across oceans. The idol industry had been cracked open. What had started as a scandal became a reckoning. A revolution. 2 months later, the 7 of them stood on a quiet rooftop in Seoul. The original members. Taehyung, Namjoon, Hoseok, Yoongi, Seokok, Yoongi, Jungkook, in a wheelchair but smiling. Jimin at his side, hand on his shoulder. They didn't speak for a long time. The wind moved through them. The city breathed beneath them. Finally, Namjoon spoke. Do you know what they'll say about us? That we were broken, Hoseok said. That we were betrayed, Taehyung added. Yoongi smirked. That we burned the house down. Jin looked up at the sky. Let them. Ray? Jungkook closed his eyes. Jimin said, let them say we didn't stay quiet. And as the sun broke through the clouds, painting light over a city that had learned how to look away for too long, the world listened to the silence. And finally, it heard the truth.